Hello, I'm Sweaterman.
And I'm Pappy03.
We don't think Suselle will be canon. Obviously, it's okay to ship Suselle, no matter what we say going forward. No matter how much we analyze the two chapters we have at the time of writing, we can't know that for sure. But the more we've thought it over, the more the idea it even could be canon starts to fall apart.
And this is coming from someone, at least me, who has Noelle as their favorite character. She's such my favorite that I found it baffling how others could believe her as this nothing burger of a doe. So, a while back, I decided to test one hypothesis. In a post on my Tumblr roughly 2 years ago now, I went through the entirety of Deltarune attempting to take account for a minimum of how much Noelle talks about Susie on a given playthrough. What this included was me trying to talk to Noelle as much as possible, but have her talk about Susie as little as possible. The numbers may be off, and I still acknowledge that, but at the time, and possibly still to now, it comes out to about 18% of all of Noelle's dialogue on a single All Recruits run is minimally dedicated to Susie, which is roughly 1 in 6 sentences. Considering that most people, on average, won't do what I did to make that number possible, I fully expect the average first playthrough of Deltarune is about 25%. That's just 1 in 4. That, plus her attitude towards Susie and the ludicrous T values that are technically not in the game yet, would seem to suggest that Noelle is utterly obsessed with Susie.
But that's strange, isn't it? Noelle doesn't really know Susie. How could she? Susie keeps to herself. She's quiet. She doesn't participate in class. She has no friends. She doesn't pick on anyone except for Chris, and when she does pick on Chris, it ranges from generally mean to throwing them around and threatening their life. And yet, not only does Noelle do nothing about this, but she uses it to try and get closer to Susie. Trying to copy things about Chris that Susie picks on them for, trying to get Chris to change seats with her under the pretense of wanting to help them, a pretense that falls apart due to a Freudian slip, no matter how many times they refuse. What gives? How can Noelle be this obsessed with Susie, despite only knowing her as a tormentor? Well, to answer that question, we need to explain Noelle's character a bit.
To be brief, Noelle is a mentally ill girl, attempting to cope with a lost sister, an abusive mother, and a sick father. She longs for her past, and her mind is constantly plagued by the thoughts of people judging her, aka social pressures. And her free time is being spent looking for deaths anywhere she can, even spam emails or various extracurriculars, the one that we know for certain being her track running. She does seem to want to be free of this, to not care, to be numb, to be away from all of her woes and her past. It's what she desires more than anything. And on the weird route, we can provide Noelle with an option to have the strength that she desires. We tell her to ice that first Virokun, and from there, she does the rest of the justification for us. We have to be doing right by her because she trusts Chris. If the enemies must die to get stronger, then she will get stronger, and getting stronger is good, isn't it? This doesn't just apply to the most extreme of her psyche's capabilities, of course. If we simply change the justification of murder to something far more tame, like, say, bullying, then we can start to see how she ticks in this regard. This gives you the reason why Noelle is so obsessed with Susie, despite only knowing bad things about her. She's using her crush on Susie as a last-ditch escapism fantasy to try and cope. Noelle cares little about the Susie that actually exists in favor of a Susie that she has built up in her own mind. The Ferris wheel is the first actual conversation they had ever had, and we can see there truly how little Noelle actually knows Susie, and how little that actually matters to her in comparison of that idea of Susie, talking about how she admires her for not being afraid to break the rules. which is something that Susie does out of necessity, despite being terrified she'll be expelled over even small things. She openly says that she doesn't think Susie cares about anyone, something obviously untrue to anyone who's played Chapter 1, and even then Susie doesn't try and object to this, which Noelle also hasn't seen Susie be anything other than this purple violent tormentor, and she doesn't know anything else.
It doesn't matter what you tell Noelle about Susie in Chapter 1. It doesn't matter that Noelle has seen Susie threaten Chris's life. Nothing she can learn about her will change her opinion. She'll still be obsessed with her, and she'll still candidly say that she doesn't believe Susie cares about anyone else. It doesn't really matter to her what kind of a person Susie is, because that's not why she has that crush. It doesn't matter if she doesn't know anything about this girl. It doesn't matter if she's seen her threaten the life of her oldest friend. If she could be with Susie, she could do things she's never been able to before. She could be strong. This is essentially the reason why we believe Suselle will not be canon. Beyond the fact that Toby has provided other viable alternatives for Susie and for Noelle, and the fact that he's seemingly gone out of his way to avoid Susie and Noelle sharing the same space since the release of Chapter 2, and the fact that it's very likely Noelle could be the angel, for reasons previously described, Noelle is a deeply hurt person. She thinks of Susie as strong because she believes Susie doesn't care about anything, and doesn't experience that hurt because she just doesn't let anything bother her. It's an idealization of an unhealthy coping mechanism, and one Susie herself recognizes as unhealthy. She hates herself for exactly the kind of lashing out that Noelle has idolized. It's unlikely she'd be willing to accept that idealization from her, let alone Noelle all but begging for Susie to walk all over her. The reason Susie doesn't pick on anyone but Chris is because she doesn't want to hurt people. She doesn't want to be a bully. The only reason she picks on Chris is because of personal baggage that she just can't help but let out. The best case scenario here is that Susie rejects Noelle when she realizes Noelle doesn't understand her at all. And the worst case scenario is they descend into a self-destructive spiral of Susie treating Noelle poorly because Noelle failed to enforce any boundaries and hating herself because of it, and Noelle failing to stand up to Susie because she's placed her emotional stability on living vicariously through a person she doesn't actually know. If we can see that this won't end well, Toby sure as hell can, because he wrote all of this. And I doubt he'd be willing to let a relationship as utterly doomed as this be romanticized and made out to be a good thing in his game. Now, obviously, we can't know either way if Suselle will actually be canon, but we're still confident in our theory regardless. That being said, any good theory requires peer review, other arguments to consider to ensure it's the best idea available with the current evidence. So, once we'd gotten our bearings, me and Pappy went out to find fans of Suselle to debate with us, in the hopes of finding any good arguments. And we didn't find shit!
Seriously. Every time we've tried to find someone willing to engage in debate with us, friendly, casual, even just a simple exchange of ideas on this topic, we've been met with nothing but dismissive, destructive dumbassery. People refusing to even attempt to understand our arguments. People openly mocking us instead of responding to our points. People straight up telling us to fuck off. Every flavor of logical fallacy, the same tired arguments we've already debunked months ago. It's genuinely infuriating how brain dead they have come off while responding to us. Like, one would expect a community around a ship, like my favorites being Suselle or seeing Cruzy, building up all of these arguments and the best arguments possible for why their ship is good, healthy, and likely to be canon. But in complete seriousness, we, in our own time, have come up with better arguments why Suselle could be canon than anything that we've been given, and this is while trying to prove that it won't be canon. For as much as we want to argue in good faith, it seems like this side of the fandom is filled with nothing but shallow, anti-intellectual assholes who gobble up a shit they don't know anything about just because it has cute lesbians in it. So, how'd you like to prove us wrong?
Since we can't in good conscience assume that this is the best the Suselle community has to offer, we've devised this challenge. For the next 2 weeks from this video's upload date, we will be accepting counter-arguments to our position that Suselle is unhealthy and will ultimately not be canon. Or, at least they won't end up in a stable relationship during the time frame the game covers. The top 5 contributors whose arguments stand up to our scrutiny will receive a free art, writing, or music commission of their choice from myself or Pappy. Any other solid rebuttals outside the top 5 will be featured in a follow-up video to this one. To enter the challenge, send an email to susellechallenge@gmail.com containing your rebuttal. Before you submit your response, you have to read the rules, which are in the document in the description. But the gist is, you have to use evidence from Deltarune itself or any other Toby Fox media to create an argument that will discredit either specific pieces of our argument, which you can read about in the document in the description, or if you feel like being ambitious, the whole damn thing. If your response stands up to scrutiny, we'll send you an email letting you know at the end of the challenge period. You think we're crazy? You think we're delusional clowns and our argument is nothing but coke? Well, come meet us at our level and prove it. Good luck, and let the games begin.